Hearing will now come to order. I am very appreciative of the administration. Don't start this yet. I'm going to hold everybody strictly. I just want to express my appreciation to these three very busy officials. Members will remember that the President announced the plan just before Labor Day. We understand that things are still evolving, but it did seem important to us in the light of the great public interest that we begin this conversation today. I also want to note that I understand that Secretary Paulson, who's been traveling after all the airplane travel, incurred a back pain. And I do want to know that the Secretary has a pain in his lower back, and he brought it here. He will not have acquired a pain in his lower back here, at least not the physical one. And that may cause him to want to stand up at some point or otherwise behave in a way that he might not ordinarily behave. So, Mr. Secretary, we appreciate your accommodating us on that. And we'll now begin the statements. And we start the clock. I mentioned Mr. Greenspan. I want to say I note in Mr. Greenspan's discussion of things, he said that with regard to both the stock market effervescence and the mortgage one, that he was constrained from acting because he did not want to diminish the whole economy, that he did not want to restrain economic activity in general. And I agree with him in both cases. I think it would have been a mistake to have deflated the economy in general, both because stock prices were going up or because there was excessive activity of a not fully responsible kind of the mortgage market. But my difference with Mr. Greenspan is that he implicitly assumed there that the choice was between deflating the economy, raising interest rates, and slowing activity down, and doing nothing. And this notion that there are only macroeconomic responses to potential abuses, I think, is problematic. In fact, there are micro responses, specifically thoughtful regulation. And to a great extent, what we are talking about here is how to take that principle of regulation and apply it. I think it's very clear. If only entities regulated by the bank regulators and the credit union administration had made loans, had originated loans, we would not be in a crisis situation. And most mortgage brokers are reasonable and responsible. But to the extent that there were irresponsible people making loans in that sector, they were not subject to appropriate regulation. And I think this shows that regulation done well can be helpful. And the argument that regulation would necessarily mean that you would be choking off loans, I'm not aware of people coming and saying, my credit union wouldn't give me a loan who should have given it to me, or my thrift. So I do think that we learn that sensible regulation can work well. And going forward, I think our job is to take the regulatory principles that have been applied by the Office of the Control of the Currency and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Thrift Supervision, NCUA, and state bank supervisors, and put them into a body of law that will cover all mortgage originators. I also believe that we should do something about the secondary market, not the same degree, but here's another argument for regulation. One of our major problems today is the lack of investor confidence. I think there's a general agreement that investors, having once been too reckless, are now to some extent too cautious. And this isn't going to go away instantly. Appropriate regulation, sensible market-oriented regulation can help there because that can restore investor confidence. The ability that we have to talk people into being more confident, I think, is limited. So sensible regulation, and I think the secondary market is a very useful addition, but an unregulated secondary market is not a necessity. And in fact, an appropriately regulated secondary market can give investors who would be buying that stuff some confidence that they were buying things that had been appropriately vetted. And I think we can do that. Then that's going forward. We talk about the current situation. It does seem that there is a logical pattern of the current situation is to try to help people who have prepayment penalties that prevent them from refinancing and getting out of excessively loans where the rate's going to go up, that's what we should do. I'm grateful to the regulators, jointly with the state regulators. There's been a lot of effort to persuade the holders of mortgages that they would be better off helping people get out from under prepayment penalties so they could refinance where that would make sense for them, rather than become the owners of a lot of vacant property in America's cities. To do that, I think we need the full participation of the FHA and of the GSEs. And I want to say at this point, I thought that what Ofeo did with regard to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac was a recognition of the problem, but not a sufficient response to it. I would like to go further. It is clear to me, too, that we should at this point be raising the cap at both the FHA and the GSEs. That has to be done statutorily. The House has now passed GSE bills, a GSE bill and an FHA bill, with a great deal of consensus and some disagreement. I believe there's a good deal of agreement between us and the administration on much of this. There are differences that are negotiable. At this point, the single most important thing is for the United States Senate to take up and act on FHA and GSE legislation so we can get into what would be a genuine three-way conference, because we're looking for a bill to be signed, not for an issue. And so those who were on the Republican side are worried the administration would be at the table. And I do want to just say now, and I've spoken to the ranking member, if the Senate were to send us a cherry-picked bill dealing only with the caps or only with the jumbo mortgages, we would not want to go along with that. I do want to deal with both of those, but only in the context of the overall legislation, and I hope the Senate will be working with us on that. The ranking member is now recognized for 5 minutes.